It was an ordinary autumn afternoon in 1986 Dublin. 13-year-old Philip Cairns waved goodbye to his family after a quick lunch at home. The walk back to Colastia was just minutes away, a familiar path through quiet suburban streets in the safety of broad daylight. But Philip never arrived, vanished without a scream, without a trace, snatched from the world in an instant. His school bag turned up days later in a nearby laneway, as if mocking the horror. A family's nightmare unfolded, endless searches, shattered hopes, and a community frozen in fear. Nearly 40 years later, the silence screams. Philip Cairns is still missing. Welcome to Crimes That Haunt Us. We release a new case every Sunday at 6 p.m, so hit subscribe and don't miss the next one. And let me know your thoughts on this case in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. In the heart of Dublin, Ireland, on September 1st, 1973, a boy named Philip Cairns entered the world, destined for a life that would one day become one of the nation's most haunting mysteries. He grew up in a close-knit family in the suburban area of Ballyroan, Rathfarnham, South Dublin, a residential neighborhood characterized by quiet streets, semi-detached homes, and proximity to local amenities. His family home was located at Ballyroan Road, a busy arterial route in Rathfarnham. Philip was the fifth of 6 children. He had 4 sisters, Mary, Sandra, Helen, and Susan, and one younger brother, Owen. His parents were Alice Cairns, originally from Castlecomer, County Kilkenny, and Philip Cairns Sr. from Ballyroan, who worked for Nestlé, the food and drink conglomerate. The grandmother also lived with the Cairns. The family was described as devoutly Catholic, with Philip being particularly religious. He was an altar boy and had recently made his confirmation, often seen photographed in a blue jacket with a red rosette. Childhood activities included playing soccer, hurling, and his main passion, fishing, fostering a typical suburban Irish upbringing in a safe, community-orientated environment. In 1986, Philip had won his fishing club's junior angling competition. Family members recalled him as kind, thoughtful, and well-liked, with no reported behavioral issues or signs of distress prior to his disappearance. Philip was quiet, easygoing, and shy, but also described as not being streetwise. His father described him as his shadow. He used to copy his father's mannerisms, with his sisters playfully mocking that fact. He is said to have been a homely boy who didn't mix much with the other lads. His best mate was his younger brother, Owen. As the leaves turned in September 1986, Philip began his first year at Colastia, a secondary all-boys Christian Brothers school located on Hillside Drive in Rathfarnham, approximately a 12-minute walk from his home on Ballyroan Road. Philip began secondary school age 13 and had completed only his 7th week of school by the time he had vanished. On October 23, 1986, what started as an ordinary day would spiral into an unimaginable nightmare, the disappearance that would grip Ireland for decades. The day unfolded as a typical Thursday in autumnal Dublin, cool, overcast weather with light rain possible, and the streets of Rathfarnham bustling with midday traffic and pedestrians. Philip's sister Helen was kept home from school due to a severe toothache. Her mum Alice spends the morning phoning around for a dentist. Approximately 8:30 a.m., Philip left his home and walked to Colastia on Hillside Drive for the start of the school day. Philip sometimes met school friend Enda Cloak, who lived on the Andevlin Road nearby, and they would walk together, but it is not known if he had met Enda that morning. They'd usually meet at the junction between Ballyroan Road and Andevlin Road. He was last seen wearing a grey or dark navy grey bomber-style jacket with black shoulder patches, a dark grey V-neck school jumper bearing the school crest, and a grey or light blue school shirt, paired with dark grey school trousers and black leather lace-up shoes, as well as carrying a grey canvas school bag containing his school books and supplies. Philip dutifully completed his morning classes with no notes of anything untoward. Then, at 12:45 p.m., Philip left Colostia to walk home for lunch, a common routine he had developed, choosing to go home to eat. He arrived home at around 1 p.m. and ate a sandwich that was prepared for him by his mother. He then busied himself preparing his books for his afternoon classes. His sister Helen was present, and also his sister Susan, who had returned home unexpectedly for a book. Susan would later remember seeing the back of Philip in the front room doing some maths. At 1:25 p.m., Philip departed his family home to return to school. He was last seen by his family at this time. He leaves shouting out to his grandma that he's heading off before saying cheerio. Given the sister's toothache and Alice ringing around for a dentist, nobody really paid any attention as Philip left. Little had they known that this would be the last time they would ever see him again. He never arrived at Colostia, vanishing en route in broad daylight. The distance is about 1 kilometer, typically taking Philip 12 minutes on foot. There are no official confirmed eyewitness sightings after he left home, though a media report published many years later would surface mentioning a neighbor to the Cairns household seeing a boy matching Philip's description talking to a driver in a parked car. His friend Unsolved Cooke would confirm to Garda that he did not see Philip on the way back to school that day, but said that that wasn't unusual. Enda lives very close to Philip, and they would sometimes walk to and from school together depending on whether Enda was heading home for lunch or not. As the afternoon wore on, Philip is usually home by 4 p.m. but does not arrive. Nobody in the household is alarmed, as sometimes he stays for extracurricular activities at school. Philip Sr. arrives home from Nestle at 5 p.m. and assumes Philip met up with a friend after school. Soon after, around 5:30 p.m., Alice and the sister with a toothache arrive back to the house from the dentist. Alice becomes concerned for Philip and begins calling into the neighbors. She soon learns that Philip never arrived back at school. She contacts Philip's friend Unsolved Cooke, whose father is a guard. They too become very worried. By 7 p.m., all of the Cairns are accounted for in the house except Philip. Alice then reports Philip missing to the Garda at Rathfarnham Garda station, triggering an immediate response. Around 8 p.m., a Garda on a motorcycle calls to the Cairns home and collected a photograph of Philip for the investigation. The disappearance shocks the community, as Ballyroan Road and surrounding areas were considered safe with no prior history of abductions or serious crime. Yet, it is not until the following day, on Friday morning, that the Garda begin to search the area for Philip. The Garda Síochána launched a massive search involving hundreds of officers, volunteers and divers. The areas combed include nearby forests in the Dublin mountains, lakes such as the Glendhu Reservoir, rivers such as the Dodder which runs along Rathfarnham and the mountains. Door-to-door inquiries cover Ballyroan Road and Devlin Road and surrounding estates. Posters were distributed via milk companies and psychics were consulted. Over 400 sightings were reported nationwide and in the UK, including Manchester, but none panned out. Over the following week, rumours amongst the community were rife, suggesting that Philip may have disappeared of his own accord. Other rumours suggested he was regularly bunking off school or that he had gone off on a fishing trip with a friend. A third, more sinister rumour doing the rounds was that Philip had been abducted by a religious cult operating in the area. But the rumours were totally false, obviously not in character with Philip's true behaviour. Philip had a post office savings account containing an untouched £40. On the bank holiday Monday, 27th of October, the Garda issues a formal missing persons alert for Philip. It appears that the Garda have little to go on at this stage and continue to investigate the case as a potential runaway. The previous year in Ireland, some 1,162 people had been reported missing. By the year's end, only 44 had remained untraced. Then, on the Wednesday 29th of October, with Colostia on a school break, some 30 fellow classmates of Philip are called back into the school. They are interviewed by 18 detectives, led by DI Pascal Anders. 8 teachers are also questioned, but very little new information is given to the detectives. That same evening, the school bag of Philip Cairns is found by 2 18-year-old girls between 7 and 8 p.m. They are Orla O'Carroll and Catherine Hassett. The girls are aware of the local missing boy. One of the girls would later tell Garda that they had cycled through the laneway multiple times earlier that day and the school bag was definitely not there. The bag, which was covered in leaves, was noticeably dry even though it had been raining for the 6 days prior. The girls searched the bag and found a name tag of Philip C. and brought it to the Rathfarnham Garda station. This laneway links Andevlin Road and Andevlin Drive in Rathfarnham, a narrow, overgrown alley near Philip's home. This discovery is a few hundred meters off the usual route that Philip took to school. The bag appeared to be recently placed. It contained Philip's pens, pencils, a copybook, a maths textbook, school journal, and his pencil case. But it was discovered that his geography book and 2 religious books were missing. The religious books were The Christian Way 1 and The Good News Testament. Forensic tests yield no clues. The absence of the religious books further compounded rumors and theories of a potential religious cult killing. The discovery of this bag a week later was also seen by some as a perfect ploy to throw the Gardaí off the scent. Sometime shortly after the vanishing of Philip, a self-employed married builder who lived close to the Cairns home came forward to Gardaí stating he saw a young schoolboy approach and talk through the open passenger door to the driver of a parked car on Ballyroan Crescent. He had driven back to his house slowly after his car engine began having troubles. It was then as he drove past slowly that he saw this interaction. The youth stumbled as he ran towards the car and appeared to slip and drop his bag before picking himself up and going to the passenger door of the car to talk to the driver, he told the Gardaí at the time. He had found the interaction odd and wrote down the number plate, but lost that piece of paper, which absolutely made him distraught. He agreed to undergo hypnosis in Ireland and the UK in an attempt to retrieve the reg number, but this failed to generate any leads. Sadly, this may have been a missed opportunity to identify Philip's abductor. On the 31st of October 1986, milkmen in Rathfarnham and surrounding areas began placing leaflets with Philip's picture alongside the milk bottles in their attempts to help find the boy. On the 2nd of November 1986, hundreds of volunteers joined police in the search for Philip at the pine forests in South Dublin. These efforts were valiant but proved fruitless. And by November, Gardaí doubled down on their belief that Philip has been abducted by someone local and familiar with the area. However, after their initial flurry of searches and door-to-door inquiries, plus a televised reconstruction, behind the scenes, the Garda incident room numbers dwindled to just 12 Gardaí and 1 detective. Over 400 potential sightings of Philip spanning the island of Ireland as well as the UK had been followed up and discounted. In total, 1,600 people were interviewed and over 200 statements were taken. The years dragged on, each one a painful reminder of the void left behind. In 1989, an anonymous caller rang Garda station multiple times alleging 2 abductors were responsible for the kidnapping of Cairns, with one of them living close to Philip's family home. But the caller reneged multiple times when agreeing to meet up with detectives, and he never called again. The Gardaí could not verify his claims, but admitted that one of those names suggested had come up as a person of interest in their investigation. And in October of 1989, the Sunday Independent newspaper conducted their own investigation into Philip's abduction and concluded that Philip was abducted and killed by a local man he knew and respected after this man had offered him a lift back to school. In 1994, the Garda released a computer-generated enhanced image of Philip through the media. This approach raised some eyebrows, as up until this point it was understood the Garda believed he was abducted and killed. It also raised the hopes of his parents that he was potentially alive. As the millennium turned, false leads continued to torment the family. In 2002, a man rang the Garda claiming to have killed Philip. The guards described him as sounding drunk and ringing from a pub. This man is never traced. Also that year, the News of the World reported that a number of private investigators had identified a pedophile group responsible for killing Philip. They say that a drug dealer who served one of the group had been told they killed Philip and buried him under a development site. Then in November 2002, the Sunday Independent also reported that they had been told through a reliable source that Philip had been sexually abused and killed to cover up the abuse. The Independent alleges that Philip had been abused by a Rathfarnham-based pedophile ring, and when they found out Philip had told a friend about it, they set out to silence him by kidnapping and killing him before dumping him in a pond on the Loreto Convent Abbey Gardens. However, the Garda strongly disputed these claims, dismissing any such group as having killed Philip. The 21st anniversary in 2007 brought renewed hope and heartbreak. RT's Crime Call aired a reconstruction of Philip's route along the Ballyroan road to school. Crime Stoppers offered a €10,000 reward, with Garda receiving over 80 tips within a day. That same year, a woman came forward claiming to be the former partner of the man who killed Philip. She claimed that the man had confessed to her that he killed Philip and that he knew where his body was buried. She told detectives that this man had told her he would kill her and her family if she ever came forward to police. 2 years later, the Garda carried out searches of land on the Grange Golf Club in Rathfarnham with this tip-off. On the 6th of May in 2019, a stretch of private wooded land just off the Grange Golf Club in Rathfarnham is searched. An area of vegetation is cleared and specialist equipment is used alongside fingertip examination techniques, seeking to find any disruption in the soil. It had rained relentlessly, hampering this search. Then later in May, just 50 meters up from the last search, geophysicists deployed specialist equipment again in an effort to locate the remains of Philip Cairns. At least one of these searches were triggered by an unnamed woman who claimed to have seen suspicious freshly dug earth there at the time of Philip's disappearance. Sadly, this operation yielded no breakthrough. Tragedy struck again on July 6, 2014, with Philip Cairns Sr. dying at Tala Hospital without any closure. Then in May 2016, a notorious pedophile was about to enter the investigation as a potential suspect in Philip Cairns' murder. A woman aged 9 in 1986 and a victim of while Eamonn Cooke contacted Garda, claiming she saw Cooke strike Philip with a blunt object at his Radio Dublin studios on the Inchicore Road, which is about 6 kilometers away from Rathfarnham on an industrial area in the old buildings. She alleged that she was being driven in Cooke's wine-colored car that day when they spotted a boy who resembled Philip. She claims Cooke said, "There he is." She alleged that when they stopped, this boy had said, "Hello, Mr. Cooke, I thought you weren't coming." This boy then gets into the car under the pretense of being shown around the radio station. Then at this station, she claims Cooke took the boy to a side room and bludgeoned him to death with a trophy. The woman says she fainted at the sight of the blood, and the next thing she knew when she woke up, she was being driven home by Cooke, with no further sighting of the boy that resembled Philip Cairns. She had only come forward after his death because she was absolutely terrified of him after what he had done to her. Child predator Eamonn Cooke was a Dublin man born in Kimmage who was married 3 times and is believed to have had up to 11 children. His criminal record spanned several decades and covered violent offences, arson, illegal broadcasting, and later serious sexual crimes. In 2003, as licensed independent radio expanded and allegations about his behavior toward children became public, his pirate radio station collapsed and ceased broadcasting in May 2003, and it was that same year his first trial for sexual offences began. He was convicted of attempted and indecent assault involving 4 girls, but the conviction was later quashed on a technicality, leading to his release in 2006. In 2007, Cooke was retried at the age of 71 on 42 sexual offences, charges dating from the mid to late 1970s. Evidence was given that he had threatened and bribed his victims. He was found guilty and sentenced to 10 years imprisonment, with credit for time already served. Then in 2016, while in hospice care at St. Francis Hospice in Dublin, suffering from terminal illness and severe dementia that limited him to yes-no responses, Cooke is interviewed by the Garda regarding the disappearance and suspected murder of Philip Cairns, following the tip-off from the woman who alleged she witnessed him assault Cairns. A social worker would later state that the Garda had been aware of this allegation since at least 2011. During the interview, Cooke confirmed, through those limited responses, that he knew Philip Cairns and acknowledged that the boy had been to his Radio Dublin station, but he did not provide any further information about what happened to Philip or where his body was, and he abruptly ended the interview before dying on June 4, 2016. In August 2016, DNA tests carried out on the school bag showed no match to Cooke, but he wasn't explicitly ruled out either. Garda continued to seek 2 people linked to the bag's placement in the laneway. That same year, it is also revealed that a victim of Eamonn Cooke had told Angela Copley, a highly respected Dublin community worker and longtime supporter and advocate for survivors of abuse, that a girl had been forced by Cooke to place Philip's bag in that laneway. After Cooke's death in June 2016, it emerged that he had written privately about the disappearance of Philip Cairns, referring to the case in unpublished documents and claiming that he had spent a prolonged period, possibly up to a year, searching for the boy in the Dublin mountains. Garda interview material and his writings indicated that he appeared to reference certain aspects of the case that were not widely known to the public at the time of Philip's disappearance. However, these assertions were disputed, with investigators and commentators noting Cooke's long-standing obsession with the case and the possibility that his recollections were influenced or distorted by cognitive decline and dementia in his later years. Despite nearly 4 decades of this investigation, the disappearance of 13-year-old Philip Cairns remains unsolved and officially classified as an active missing person inquiry. Garda continued to pursue multiple lines of inquiry and appeal for information from the public, including testimony from individuals who were children at the time of Philip's disappearance and may have relevant information. Convicted Eamonn Cooke was considered a suspect in the case, but no confession was obtained and no body or definitive forensic evidence linked him to Philip. The DNA found on his school bag had not yielded a match to Cooke or any other individual. Alice Cairns, the mother of Philip, died peacefully on Tuesday, November 11, 2025. She was predeceased by her husband, Philip Sr. in 2014, and passed away without answers regarding her son's disappearance. And at the center of this long and unresolved investigation is Philip Cairns himself, just a 13-year-old schoolboy who left his home on an ordinary October morning and never returned. Beyond the theories, suspects, and unanswered questions, Philip was a child whose life was abruptly taken from him and whose absence has been endured for decades by a family and community left without certainty or closure. As the case remains open, the continued focus on truth and accountability serves not only the pursuit of justice, but also as a reminder that Philip should be remembered first and foremost as a young boy deserving of dignity, care, and an answer to what happened to him. Thank you for watching and listening to Philip's story. Please feel free to add your own comments, thoughts, and theories down below, and we'll see you next time.